For what purpose does Mr. Biggs seek recognition?
Move strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. It's my understanding that the purpose of this bill in the ANS is actually to provide a choice of forum for the victim of sexual harassment and sexual assault. That's my understanding. And I think that is a worthy and noble cause. I think the language on page 2 of the ANS, starting line 19 and extending to line 8 on page 3 are problematic. I hope that those will be revisited and fixed because I do think that there's a chance that some will actually use the language that's there to try to redefine sexual harassment in a way that's different than has been well established through the case law that's been developed in this area over the last 40 years. So I hope that gets taken care of. But in the meantime, I'm going to, and by the way, I'll suggest that if it does get taken care of, then I will be for the bill, and I think Mr. Buck's amendment is the right answer to that. So let me just real quick cover a couple things. And one of which is dealing with Merrick Garland. And I think it is critical that we discuss this because I do think it is a critical issue as well. And I look back and I think what happened on September 29th, and there was a letter that went to Mr. Garland, the Attorney General. And within a few days, on October 4th, he issued a directive to the FBI and other departmental components to proceed forward to investigate parents who showed up at school board meetings. And what he said was, there's a disturbing spike in these types of incidents of harassment, intimidation, threats of violence. Now, when asked about that, Mr. Garland said, well, I haven't seen any data or reports. He says that he'd seen a newspaper account or something like that. That's what he relied on. And then later, he testified on the 21st that parents would never be considered domestic terrorists. He said, oh my goodness, we would never invoke the Patriot Act on them. And a whistleblower has come forth that the day before that took place said that indeed the Criminal Investigative Division and Counterterrorism Division of the FBI was pressing forward and putting a tag on parents who showed up. They tasked their counterterrorism unit to spy on Americans, parents who happen to exercise their rights to speak at school board meetings, parents who want to make sure their kids' education is appropriate. That's a Soviet-style surveillance. So I'm left saying, well, either he didn't know what was going on, in which case that ought to give us real major pause for concern, or he did know and he lied and perjured himself on both points with regard to designating parents as terrorists and use or misuse and abuse of the Patriot Act. On both of those. So you got reports from the whistleblowers that, and we actually have a copy of the memo. We have a copy of the memo that was issued. So this is something that's really serious, and we should have a hearing and bring Merrick Garland in here to answer these serious questions. And with that, I'll yield some time to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Well, I'm just going to make the point, and I appreciate the gentleman yielding in his comments. Earlier, Mr. Gates gave a speech before the place went black. He gave his remarks, and he asked, I think, the appropriate question: what's the number? Yeah. What's the number of Americans who's now have a threat tag on their name? How many moms across this country now have a terrorist tag associated with their name? And guess what? Only one person can give us that answer: the Attorney General of the United States. So the question that Mr. Biggs just raised, Mr. Chairman, is the most important question we have to deal with today. When will you call the Attorney General back and set him right there at that table so we can ask him those questions? That's the question. That's you. Mr. Biggs raised the right question. I yield back to the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, and I'll yield my final time to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop.
I don't think we can do anything to touch the surface here I would suggest to you that on page 3 of the bill, there is a prohibition of arbitration, pre-dispute arbitration, for any claim federal, state, or tribal in this bill. That's not concern for federalism, but we'll come back and talk about it later, I hope.
The gentleman yields back. We have 2 votes on the House floor. Therefore, we will recess and return immediately after the conclusion of those votes.